The title of this presentation is Killer Food in the Name of Profit. It is the story of corporate and government collusion. Before I begin this presentation, I want to take a second to introduce myself. My name is Larry Ballard. I'm a speaker and author of two books, Modern Slavery and the Fight for Freedom, and The Economic Tribulation, How to Survive and Prosper. I'm currently writing the third book, which is the subject of this slide presentation. Modern Slavery and the Fight for Freedom is the story of how the United States of America is ostensibly being intentionally driven into economic collapse in order to one day force it into the New World Order. The Economic Tribulation, How to Survive and Prosper, is a study of the Great Depression of 1929 and gives readers insights as to how to invest in a downturn economic economy. We have Richard Nixon to thank for the epidemic of obesity in the United States and worldwide. It began in 1973 when Nixon, fearful of losing the election because of soaring food prices, contacted USDA Secretary Earl Butz and instructed him to introduce a massive farm subsidies bills on commodity items, most importantly corn. Then in 1975, high-fructose corn syrup was introduced into the U.S. market. Food manufacturers quickly replaced sugar with the cheaper high-fructose corn syrup. Next, Nixon contacted the USDA, AMA, and AHA and pushed for a low-fat diet, supposedly to reduce heart disease. The irony is that it had exactly the opposite effect. Next, demand for longer shelf life and flavor enhancement led to adding massive amounts of salt, fructose, and chemical preservatives to our food, while at the same time removing the fiber. The net of these changes is that our food supply lost its nutrient value and became the underlying cause of obesity worldwide. How is it possible that a known carcinogen can be approved for use in our food supply? The answer is influence peddling. Donald Rumsfeld, former CEO of GD Searle, a Monsanto Chemical Company division, and former Secretary of Defense, used his political connections to force a known addictive carcinogen on the market. The carcinogen is aspartame, a dietary supplement used in cola. The FDA's own toxicologist, Dr. Adrian Gross, told Congress that without a shadow of a doubt, aspartame can cause brain tumors and brain cancer, and violated the Delaney Amendment, which forbids putting anything in the food that is known to cause cancer. Aspartame is a drug, not an additive. It interacts with other drugs, has a synergistic and addictive effect with MSG. It is a chemical hypersensitization agent. So for those of you who have elected not to drink regular soda, but drink diet soda instead, you need to be cognizant that you are taking a known carcinogen, because aspartame is in most of the soda products that are used in America today, thanks to Donald Rumsfeld. For those of you who think that influence isn't for sale, think again. This is the story of how Rumsfeld was instrumental in getting the FDA to approve aspartame. Rumsfeld was instrumental in getting Ronald Reagan elected president. Then immediately after he was elected, Reagan returned the favor by firing the head of the FDA because he would not approve aspartame. Coincidentally, or otherwise, the new head of the FDA immediately approved aspartame, despite the fact that it violates the Delaney Amendment, which forbids putting anything in a food that is known to cause cancer. Rumsfeld was also instrumental in the success story behind Tamiflu. Rush Pharmaceuticals was having a difficult time getting Tamiflu to the market. Then Rumsfeld is appointed Secretary of the State, and overnight bird flu is a national threat, and Roche made a literal killing. Coincidence? I think not. What you're looking at is the cover of Fortune magazine, and an article, Is Fat the Next Tobacco? There are major corollaries to be drawn between the food industry and the tobacco industry. For years, the tobacco industry hid from us the fact that cigarettes were highly addictive and are major carcinogen. Now, the food industry is doing precisely the same thing. They have added additives to their food that makes it addictive and carcinogenic. The good news is that the American people finally exposed the tobacco industry and major changes have been made. I hope that through this slide presentation and through the awareness of the American public that we will one day see the same changes be made in the food industry. A few years ago, there was a suit filed against McDonald's on behalf of two obese children, claiming that McDonald's was directly responsible for their obesity. Many called it, as you might imagine, a crazy, frivolous suit. I, however, don't think it was crazy or frivolous. They didn't win, but I believe they had a very sound case, and in the next few slides I'm going to compare the marketing tactics of the cigarette industry and the fast food industry and show you that we are effectively being brainwashed and being sold products that are absolutely detrimental to our health. One of the principal reasons I believe that the McDonald's lawsuit was not frivolous has to do with their marketing tactics. They market to our children when they're young and impressionable, and they effectively brainwash them with images of Ronald McDonald, with McDonald cartoons, with McDonald Playland, with McDonald Happy Meals, with McDonald toys, with McDonald birthday parties, and Madison Avenue even has a name for what they do. They call it brand imprinting for later actualization in life. And McDonald's has a name for their customers too. They call us users. So it's my opinion that any company that markets to children with a product that is unhealthy for them and leads to later health problems in life is not if legally culpable, at least morally and ethically culpable. And I further believe that there should be laws protecting our children so that any product that is unhealthy for them cannot be advertised to children below a certain age. There is also a corollary in the tobacco industry. I can remember as a child going to the store and buying candy cigarettes so I could be just like Dad. And again, the idea behind the advertising agencies was brand imprinting for further actualization in life. If they were successful, I'd wake up one day as a young adult and I'd have a craving to smoke. And if they were extremely successful, I would smoke the brand that they had imprinted on me when I was an impressionable young child, and they had subliminally conditioned me to use their addictive carcinogenic product. This slide draws further corollaries between the marketing tactics of the tobacco industry and the food industry. For years, the tobacco industry lied to us about the fact that smoking caused cancer. They also failed to tell us that they add ammonia to their cigarettes in order to make the nicotine highly addictive. Likewise, the food industry adds salt, sugar, flavor enhancers, and fructose to their product to make it addictive, and it is the underlying cause of obesity in America and all of the precipitating illnesses that are derived from obesity. I personally feel that the advertising tactics that McDonald's uses are nothing short of brainwashing. In 2001, McDonald's spent $1.4 billion on advertising. The average American sees 10,000 food advertisements per year, most of which are for junk food, and most of which are targeted at our children. In the course of the lawsuit that I mentioned a minute ago, McDonald's was forced to admit that their foods are harmful. I quote, "It is also a matter of common knowledge that any processing that its food undergoes serves to make them, quote, more harmful than unprocessed foods." So McDonald's was forced to admit that their processed food is more harmful than unprocessed food. Mothers, you are feeding your children a potpourri of chemicals. Down below are three pictures. The first one is a picture of a Happy Meal taken on the day it was purchased. The second picture is a picture of that same Happy Meal taken 171 days later. The third picture is a picture of normal French fries just 14 days after they were purchased. As you can see, they are covered with mold and they are decaying. Mothers, ask yourself, when you feed your children food that is so full of preservatives that the normal biological breakdown of the food is inhibited, what is that doing to your children's health? I don't want you to think I'm picking on McDonald's because all of the fast food restaurants, and in fact all the processed food, contain additives and preservatives that are unhealthy and that are contributory to childhood obesity. But what's unique about McDonald's is they, more than any other fast food restaurant, target our children with an onslaught of advertisements. And additionally, McDonald's is by far the largest fast food restaurant in the world, with 13,774 stores in the U.S. and 31,667 stores worldwide. So just how serious is the obesity epidemic? According to David Satcher, former U.S. Surgeon General, obesity is second only to smoking as a major cause of preventable death, with 400,000 deaths per year from related illnesses. Satcher says, and I quote, "I think fast foods are a major contributor to this epidemic. You go to any fast food store and they are trained to tell you to buy a bigger size. For example, if you buy a Big Gulp, which is 64 ounces, you consume a whopping 48 teaspoons of sugar, and depending on how much ice you add, 600 to 800 calories. And if at McDonald's you supersize from the small to the large fry, your calorie intake goes from 200 calories to a whopping 600 calories just for your fries." It's no coincidence that in the last 25 years we've seen a doubling of weight and obesity in children. There's a direct correlation between this obesity and the initiation of President Nixon's supposed low-fat diet in the 1970s. But of more concern is the incidence of preventable illness that is directly related to obesity. Everything from coronary heart disease to a variety of different types of cancers, and most concerning is the advent of childhood diabetes that has reached epidemic proportion. According to Tommy Thompson, Secretary of Health and Human Services, at least 17 million Americans now have type 2 diabetes. That's about 1 out of every 20 people. And if trends continue, 1 in 3 children born in 2000 in the U.S. will develop diabetes in their lifetime. For minorities, the number is expected to be 1 in 2. The tragedy is that this epidemic is completely avertible. All we have to do is stop eating a constant diet of processed foods and fast foods, and instead switch to natural foods, to fruits and vegetables, to the foods that God intended for us to eat in the first place.